I personally believe that from a young age, we're indoctrinated to not ask questions. So about a week or so ago, a political commentator by the name of Charlie Kirk passed away. Sadly, he was attacked, and I don't know if I can say this word on YouTube, but I'll just say struck down at what I believe to be a college due to, at the time, who was considered an unknown assailant, but I do believe has been found and caught. And that whole series of events was fascinating to me. It was fascinating not because of the state of America. It wasn't fascinating solely based on the person that was attacked, we'll say. It was fascinating because of the reactions that people had surrounding the attack. Now, I'm not going to talk too much about the overall political scenario. To be quite honest, I don't particularly care that much. I don't view myself as left or right. But what I do like to view myself as is someone who tries to seek the truth. And if you're here, you've probably read the title of this video, and you hopefully might understand where I'm going with this. One of the things that fascinates me the most about people in society, people in general, is our lack of questioning. A lot of people, what I tend to find is that we assume we have the answers to all of the problems of the world. And because we have this belief that we have the solutions to every problem, we don't seek to challenge those beliefs. We don't seek to ask any further questions. I like to think that currently in society, we have endless information, yet we lack very much wisdom. And I think that this recent assault demonstrated that perfectly. I remember when I first saw news of that assault, I was with a friend and I told my friend, oh boy, this will cause some interesting riots to happen, at the very least. And immediately, once this assault occurred, I knew exactly which side every person would take instantly. I knew that very few people would ask who did the attack, and I knew that most people would simply come up with a conclusion off the top of their heads without any real evidence or without any external information to validate their point. Essentially, they would just make an assumption and they would believe their assumption to be fact, even if it wasn't fact. And that's exactly what happened. As days went on, there were more details about who this attacker was, and it turns out that the attacker, I guess the profile that people had of him, of this person, did not fit their initial assumption. And what I saw most people do is not take back what they said, but they doubled down on it and just, I guess, tried to look for ways to make their original belief true. Now, the reason why I bring this up mainly is because it's a recent event. It's kind of been on the top of my head, but it does lead to sort of a long-term issue that I see in people in general. And that problem is our lack of willingness to simply stop, detach ourselves emotionally from whatever circumstances we're in or whatever situation has just occurred, and ask ourselves, what is the objective solution to this problem? What is the objective reason why this thing happened? We don't ask questions in society. And that was, in this whole series, as you may have seen in my previous videos, I'm talking about my book, 27 by 27. Not so much about the book itself, but about the lessons I've learned over the past, now it's been 27 plus years, but at that time, 27 years. And as I kind of go back and reread the book and plan out the content that I'm going to make for this video series, it's remarkable how the lessons I learned back then applied a lot back then, but they apply even more now. Like, they're timeless lessons. The more I read the book, the more I realize that these are timeless lessons. And the more I'm compelled to share these lessons with you, because I think they're not going to go away anytime soon. They're always going to be valuable lessons. I think in the grand scheme of things, this is personally my objective. I like to be the kind of person that seeks truth in the world. I like the idea of knowing why things occur. I think when you seek truth to the best of your ability, you can use the truth advantageously. When you seek to view things objectively to the best of your ability, you can use the objective nature of reality to your benefit. For example, if you understand why a company is trying to profit, you can use that information to perhaps yourself profit, or to perhaps yourself not be manipulated by whatever this company shares with you. If you understand that many companies are trying to profit primarily, and if you understand that they're willing to say whatever needs to be said to convince you to buy said product, then you can use that advantageously. How much you use that advantageously? You might use that advantageously by understanding that they might manipulate data to get you to buy. You might use that advantageously to understand that they might say things to you that isn't necessarily true and might actually be harmful, if it means you sacrificing some of your dollars to increase the overall value of this company or to increase the overall revenue or the profits of this company. This idea of seeking truth, this idea of asking questions, to me is vital. To me, it's a very fundamental, vital part of living a high quality life. And that's ultimately the objective of the book and ultimately the objective of many of these lessons. It's to live a higher quality life. When I saw this whole situation with Charlie Kirk go down, you have people on the left who are blaming one side for something, and you have people on the right blaming the other side for something. It's a very binary take on what happened. In reality, there could be some aspects of what actually went down that neither side is aware of. And could they be aware of it? Sure, they might be able to access this information. They might be able to understand exactly what occurred, but they're unwilling to do so because they're sort of letting their beliefs dictate their reality. They're forming assumptions and letting that assumption dictate how they view the world. And when you do that, you kind of put yourself into a box. But when you put yourself into a box, you're unable to see reality for what it truly is. I know that all sounds a bit confusing. I think ultimately what I try to do and what I suggest you do, and I've made a video about this in the past, is if you're trying to find truth in the world, the best thing you can do is ask questions. And when you're trying to ask questions, there are many questions you can ask. The best question, in my personal opinion, to ask, at least initially, is why. And the reason why I think why is the best question is because, to me, why is sort of the foundation to understanding how something works. When you understand why, you get at the heart and soul of a problem. And when you're at the heart and soul of a problem, you can find the solution. If you have a problem, you can ask the how, and that might let you understand the mechanics of what caused the problem, but you don't really understand the heart of the problem, so you might not be able to fix it. The where, the what, the when, those are all fine as well. But again, like I said, the why in itself really lets you figure out what is occurring, and it lets you really figure out the underlying reasons behind what is occurring. And when you understand the reasons behind why something's occurring, you can improve upon it. So I know this all sounds like super confusing, maybe, but let me try to give some anecdotes to kind of illustrate this point further. Let's take health, wealth, and relationships, all three pillars. I like to use these three pillars because I think I've mentioned this in other videos. One of my long-term goals is to achieve eudaimonia. I think most people should try to achieve eudaimonia. Eudaimonia is the fulfilled life, the good life. It is created by you constantly trying to build up the pillars of health, wealth, and relationships. So I like to kind of view life with these three pillars in mind whenever I'm sort of asking myself questions or when I'm trying to come up with solutions. So, health. What's a big problem that comes down to that we see in health? One of the biggest problems that comes to mind, at least quickly, is the obesity problem. Here in America, at the very least, we have an obesity epidemic. Many Americans are extremely overweight. I think about 60% of Americans are overweight, and out of those 60% of Americans that are overweight, I think about 43-ish% are obese. That is a lot of people who are unhealthy. We have a problem. Now, how do we come up with a solution? To get to the true heart of what causes obesity here in America, you have to get to the why. And I don't want to go down too deep into a rabbit hole, but the why could be some things along the lines of cheaper quality foods because of profits, because we're in America, and America is very capitalistic, very profit-driven. Part of the why could be lack of exercise. I personally think that's a big reason why. Another reason could be lack of understanding of diet. I think that's another reason why. But hopefully this makes sense. The more you ask why, the more you're forced to kind of really get clear about the different causes of a problem. And once you have those causes, you can find the reverse of those causes, which are solutions. That's a health example. Wealth. Someone who might be poor. This is a question I asked myself back about a decade or so ago. I was lacking money. I wanted to get money. And I did ask, how do I make money? But the thing that really caused me to figure out a solution to my income problem was, why don't I have money in the first place? Why do I feel like I need money? Once I started asking those questions about why, it sort of opened my mind up more to coming up with objective solutions to my problems. I remember years ago, I started by asking how. Like, how do I make more money? And you find infinite ways to make more money. But not every way to make money is a good quality way to make money. For example, you could ask yourself, how do I make more money? And one of the solutions you come up with could be, oh, I rob somebody. Well, that's not really a great solution, because sure, you could get money by robbing somebody, but the consequences of that action could lead to dire results. So rather than start with how, it's best to start with why. Why do I want to make more money in the first place? I want to make more money because I want a higher quality of life. Okay, cool. That's a solution. Since I know that I want to have a higher quality of life, the hows need to support the why. If I rob this guy, will I have a higher quality of life? No, because I'll feel guilty. I might go to jail or prison. That's going to lead to a lower quality of life, and I might not even get that much money to begin with. Okay, cool. So this how can be stricken away. We can write that off. Why do I want to make more money? I want to have a higher quality of life. What's another how? I can do a grueling corporate job that's 12 to 15 hours a day. Will that make me more money? Sure. Will that lead to me having a higher quality of life? Not necessarily. We can strike that out. Okay, cool. Again, the why. I want to make more money. Why? Because I want a higher quality of life. Let me try to start a business in my own free time on the internet, for example. Will that lead to me making more money? Yes. Will that lead to me having a higher quality life? Evidence supports the idea that yes, it will lead to me having a higher quality life, because I might not have to sacrifice that much time to make more money. I can be more remote, etc., etc. Hopefully you understand like the trail of logic that I'm using right now. But my point is, by asking and starting with why, you can sort of understand the true reasons things occur. And once you understand the reasons why things occur, you can come up with valid solutions to those problems. Relationship pillar. This is a big one because I see a lot of people in bad relationships, and I see a lot of people struggling in the modern era, at least in America. It seems to be a little bit in all Western countries, and even in some Eastern countries I've been seeing, like Japan and Korea. But regardless, one of the biggest things I've been seeing is a struggle with relationships. So many people might ask themselves, how do I get in better relationships? Okay, I can date more girls. I can talk to more people. If you're a girl, maybe I can sleep with other guys. I can go out to the bars and clubs. You understand the what and you understand the how, but you don't really understand the why, like the deep why. And I think by asking the whys, again, you really get to find a higher quality how and what, etc. Once you get the why, the other solutions begin to follow. Why do I want to be in a relationship? Well, I want to be in a relationship because I want to feel happy, I want to feel secure, etc., etc. The reasons are your own, by the way. I'm not saying these are the reasons. I'm saying how you answer why determines what actions you take afterward. These are just hypotheticals. So you might say, okay, why do I want to be in a relationship? Oh, I want to be secure. I want to feel fulfilled. I want to be happy. Okay, cool. Why am I single? I'm single because every relationship I've been in prior has not worked out. Why have my relationships prior not worked out? Well, they haven't worked out because I got into a fight frequently, or the guy I'm with cheated, or the girl I'm with cheated, or the girl I'm with wants to prioritize fun versus whatever. Okay, why does this person prioritize fun? Or why did this person cheat? Well, this person cheated because... And as you start to ask why, you go deeper and deeper into the rabbit hole about what caused the problems to occur in the first place. And like I keep mentioning, once you find out what the problems are, you can come up with solutions. Fundamentally, I think a lot of people just don't ask questions, and they certainly don't ask the question why, because we believe we have the solutions to our problems. And I think this leads to people just constantly spinning this wheel in which nothing ever improves in their lives. They don't reach that point of eudaimonia. They don't reach that point of fulfillment, mainly because they don't ask why. They're not asking questions. They're not asking the right questions. I want to read an excerpt from the book just to kind of illustrate this point a bit further. Typically, people who don't ask questions tend to believe that they have the answers. Why ask a question you know the answer to? And therein lies the issue. I'm not suggesting this is a conscious decision. I sense this is more subconscious. Many people will read a single article or get their degree and assume they have everything figured out. Granted, there are certainly people that actively comprehend that they don't know everything, but actions speak louder than words, and their inaction, when it comes to learning and asking more questions, is evidence of how much they truly value information. My belief is that everyone should question everything at all times. You should question your parents, your school, your teachers, the laws of nature, physics, what you can observe with your eyes, and even your own thoughts. Everything. Only by questioning something can we hope to understand something. One of the most interesting and thought-provoking statements I've heard over the past 5 years is, a statement closes the mind while a question opens it. So I definitely think that a lot of people don't ask enough questions. And so I'm going to give you a little bit of grace right now if you're watching this. It's not entirely your fault that you don't ask enough questions. I personally believe that from a young age, we're indoctrinated to not ask questions. This is a belief I've had for quite a while now. I think that when you're young, to an extent, you're kind of like a tiny genius. I've said this before, but I think when you're kind of young, you're open to more possibilities. And because you're more open to possibilities, because you're more curious, you're more inclined to ask more questions. And because you're more inclined to ask questions, you just perceive the world very differently. You're more willing to, I guess, test things out, which I think is what makes someone a genius. Is what makes someone highly intelligent, them being willing to be curious and test things out. You see people like Leonardo da Vinci, who people consider to be a genius. In reality, what made him seem like a genius is because he was just so good at a bunch of different things. But how do you become good at something? You become good at something by being curious about something long enough, being curious about something and trying that thing long enough until you've built up a certain degree of proficiency in it. When it comes to a wide variety of things, how do you become good? How do you become curious about a wide variety of things? How do you become good at a wide variety of things? Well, you become curious about many different things until you've tested different things out and become good at a variety of different things. It's really that simple. So when you're a kid, you're naturally curious because you're good at being physical. Well, like when I say being physical, you're willing to do things that are more athletic by default in general. You're willing to basically explore science. And I'm not saying science in like a academics degree, in an academic sense where you're sitting in a classroom trying to learn about physics. You're doing it in a more practical sense. When you see rain and you're asking questions about why rain falls, why the sky is a certain color, why lights are a certain way, why you do certain things, that's you exploring science from a practical standpoint. You're asking questions to get an answer. Well, I guess overall the thing I want to say is that when you're young, you have this natural curiosity, which I think makes you more inclined to be a genius. And as you get older, what happens is a combination of your parents, your community, and society as a whole pushes those questions out of you, and they put you in a box where they force you to think a specific way. And if you don't think a certain way, then you become ridiculed or you become isolated or ostracized. I saw once, I think a few years ago, there was this kid who was, I was doing an open house. I was a real estate agent full time. And there was a kid who came in for an open house and he was asking his mom a bunch of questions. And he was like, yeah, Mom, I was learning in class the other day about planets and about this and this and the star system and different galaxies. And he was just like spewing tons of information about space. And it was fascinating because he was super intelligent, this kid. Like, it was stuff that I think most adults wouldn't even be able to process very well. And you can tell he did this a lot because his parents seemed so exhausted by it. Like, the moment he started talking about this stuff, his parents are just kind of like, oh, here we go again. Johnny's talking about school again. And he's asking his parents a bunch of questions. And they kind of just shut him off. They don't really answer. They say, oh, we'll look it up later. Let's not talk about this now. Let's do it later. And I think in a general sense, I think if you're a parent, that seems harmless. Because in a sense, you're kind of prioritizing how you feel in the moment over how your kid might feel and what pattern that might cause in that kid, what habit you're kind of installing or what mindset you're installing in that kid. I think in the grand scheme of things, it's super harmful because what you do is you're effectively expressing to the kid, I don't care about your curiosity. Stop being this curious. It's annoying me. Whenever you ask this question, you're not going to be met with a response. And of course, if you're someone who asks questions and you never get a response, what do? You'll stop asking questions. Or at the very least, you'll hide your questions. I think that's how parents influence kids in a negative way. School does it too. I remember when I was in school, I would always initially used to question things. the teacher would say one thing, I'd say, why is it this way? I'm sure if you're watching this right now, you've had kids who, for example, you're taking algebra and the teacher's teaching you about like, I don't know, some formula in algebra, or you're taking geometry or trigonometry, and you're learning some formula or some equation, whatever, some concept. And a kid might say, teacher, this is all cool, but when will we use this? Why are we learning this right now? To which the teacher responds basically with, because I told you to, or because this is what we do. It's not a real response. It's not a real strategy of applying what you're learning to a realistic, like real world scenario. A lot of teachers, what they do is when a kid asks them why we're doing this, or why we're learning this thing, or why is it significant or important, instead of giving them a genuine, valid response, they essentially say, shut up and listen. And if you don't, you're bad. That's it. You have a test. I remember there are tons of tests I took where the question was presented one way, and in reality, there are multiple solutions to the question, but the teacher is only looking for one answer. And if you didn't give that correct answer, you'd get a bad grade. So you effectively teach kids, and this is what initially was taught to me, there is only one solution to every single problem. And if you can't find that one solution, then you are by default incorrect. When life is not that way, of course. Life is not black and white. Life is 50 shades of gray. Ha ha ha. But the point is that every single problem has multiple solutions, but you can't reach those solutions if you're unwilling to ask why. And you can't ask why if you're conditioned to not challenge the premise in the first place. If you're not conditioned to ask questions or challenge the problem that's in front of you, you won't get to a good solution. And it creates a trickle-down effect. I think this is why so many people are shut off and so many people just don't exercise critical thinking. We're taught not to. We're taught not to ask questions. We're taught not to challenge things even when other people believe them to be true. There have been tons of times where the majority of people believe something to be one way, and myself or other people have challenged it and been like, no, I don't believe this to be true. You can't tell me, like, I'm asking you why this is true, and none of you guys are giving me a valid solution. You're just saying that this is the answer, but that's not good enough. Tell me why it's the correct answer. They can't do it. And then eventually when you do your own discovery, you come to realize, no, they're just all incorrect. And they're just a bunch of people listening to other people. So they're not finding solutions. There's a problem that exists, and everyone's unhappy because they can't solve the problem. But no one's going to solve the problem because they're unwilling to ask a question to get to the solution. Again, I know it sounds super confusing. Hopefully it's not like overly complicated. I know I'm probably saying this in like a super weird way, which, you know, of course is my fault. I apologize for that. If you have any questions, by the way, leave a comment below. I'll try to answer it in a more succinct way that makes more sense. But yeah, I guess the overall takeaway to this video, and one of the lessons from the book that I want to share with you, is ask more questions in general. Don't just assume you have the solutions to problems. Don't just assume that the answers given to you are the correct answers. And if you really want to find the truth, ask why way more often. Always be asking why. So that will bring us to the end of this video. Hope you enjoyed this. Hope this made at least some sense to you. If it did, if you agree, if you disagree, leave a comment below. I love to see your responses, and I love to answer more questions or give more insights, or even if you want to challenge some of my beliefs, I'm totally open to it. I love when people challenge things I say because it helps me find the truth more. One final thing, if you already haven't, please subscribe to this channel. It helps me a lot. I'm trying to reach 5,000 subscribers by the end of this year. We're super close. So every subscribe helps tremendously. And if you know someone else who might enjoy this video, please share it with them. And until next time, I'll see you. Peace out. Bye.